Asodanandana Badjanarandana Yamuna Tera Vanachari Yamuna Tera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Givadadhari Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Givadadhari Asodanandana Badjanarandana Asodanandana Badjanarandana Yamuna Tera Vanachari Yamuna Tera Vanachari Ram Vismaram Savajgada Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai ISKCON Guru Ki Jai Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gopal Oh, glorious some devotees, oh, glorious some devotees, oh, glorious to some devotees, oh, glorious to Shigu and Shiganga. Yeah, it's not today's, it is 3:15:31. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, chapter 15, text 31. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tabyam misatswani mishishudni shadyamna. 3:15:31. I mean, I can just read it if we don't want to chant. Tabyam misatswani mishishudni shadyamna. Swahatamaha apihare pratyahara pabhyam. Uchu suruttamati drikshite bangaishat. Kamanujena sahasata upaplutaksha. Tavyam mishatsvani me shushini shidyamya. Srahatamahi apihare pratihara prabhyam. Uchu suvitamati drikshite banga ishat. Kamanujena sahasata upaplutaksha. Tavyam ishatsani me shushini shidamnya. Sahatamahi apihade patahada pabram. Uchu surutamadi drikshiti banga ishat. Kamanujena sahasata upaplataksha. Word for word, Tabyam, by those two porters, Mishatsu, while looking on, Animeshishu, demigods living in Vaikuntha, Nishidamya, being forbidden, Suahatama, by far the fittest persons. He api, although Hare, of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pratihara Prabram, by the two doorkeepers. Uchuhu, said, Suruttama, most beloved. Didrikshata, eagerness to see. Bange, hindrance. Ishat, slight. Kama anujina, by the younger brother of lust, anger. Sahasa, suddenly. Te, those great sages. Upapluta, agitated. Akshaha, eyes. Translation purpose Angry C.C. Bhagavatam Swami Shubhapa. When the Kumaras, although by far the fittest persons, were thus forbidden entrance by the two chief doorkeepers of Sri Hari, while other divinities looked on, their eyes suddenly turned red because of anger due to the great eagerness to see their beloved master, their most beloved master, Sri Hari, the personality of Godhead. Purport. According to the Vedic system, a sannyasi, a person in the renounced order of life, is dressed in saffron-coloured garments. This saffron dress is practically a passport for the mendicant and sannyasi to go anywhere. The sannyasi's duty is to enlighten people in Krishna consciousness. Those in the renounced order of life have no other business but preaching the glories and supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Vedic sociological conception is that a sannyasi should not be restricted. He is allowed to go anywhere and everywhere he wants, and he is not refused any gift he might demand from a householder. The four Kumaras came to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan. The word Sarittama, best of all friends, is important. As Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, he is the best friend of all living entities, Surudam Sarvabhutanam. No one can be a greater well-wishing friend to any living entity than the Supreme Personality Godhead. He is so kindly disposed towards everyone that in spite of our completely forgetting our relationship with the Supreme Lord, he comes himself, sometimes personally, as Lord Krishna appeared on this earth, and sometimes as his devotee, as did Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And sometimes he sends his bona fide devotees to reclaim all the fallen souls. Therefore, he is the greatest well-wishing friend of everyone. And the Kumaras wanted to see him. The doorkeepers should have known that the four sages had no other business and therefore to restrict them from entering the palace was not apt. In this verse, it is figuratively stated that the younger brother of desire suddenly appeared in person when the sages were forbidden to see their most beloved personality of Godhead. The younger brother of desire is anger. If one's desire is not fulfilled, the younger brother anger follows. Here we can mark that even great saintly persons like the Kumaras were also angry. But they were not angry for their personal interests. They were angry because they were forbidden to enter the palace to see the personality of Godhead. Therefore, the theory that in the perfectional stage one should not have anger is not supported in this verse. Anger will continue even in the liberated stage. These four mendicant brothers, the Kumaras, were considered liberated persons, but still they were angry because they were restricted in their service to the Lord. The difference between the anger of an ordinary person and that of a liberated person is that an ordinary person becomes angry because his sense desires are not being fulfilled, whereas a liberated person like the Kumaras becomes angry when restricted in the discharge of duties for serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the previous verse, it has been clearly mentioned that the Kumaras were liberated persons. Viditatma tattva means one who understands the truth of self-realization. One who does not understand the truth of self-realization is called ignorant, but one who understands the self, the super-self, their interrelation, and activities in self-realization is called Viditatma tattva. Although the Kumaras are already liberated persons, they nevertheless became angry. This point is very important. Becoming liberated does not necessitate losing one's sensual activities. Sense activities continue even in the liberated stage. The difference is, however, that sense activities in liberation are accepted only in connection with Krishna consciousness, whereas sense activities in the conditioned stage are enacted for personal sense gratification. Tasme Shigave Namaha. So this is Maitreya continuing speaking to Vidura, relating what Lord Brahma spoke to the Devas when they approached him to try to understand why the universe had become very dark. So he begins to relate the story of how Jai and Vijay were cursed to take birth as demons. So, of course, we understand Jai and Vijay, as mentioned in Bhagavatam, that they understood their master's desire to engage in martial pastimes, like fighting pastimes. And they prayed that may we able to help you fulfill this desire. So Lord Vishnu, understanding or accepting their prayer, this whole Leela of the four Kumaras cursing Jai and Vijay was a result of their original prayer to take birth in the material world as demons, and they could engage in these fighting pastimes with Vishnu. Because in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual world, there are no demons. Vishnu or Krishna, he doesn't engage in these sort of fighting pastimes with the demons, because there are no demons in the spiritual world. So therefore we only see these particular pastimes in the material realm. So the four Kumaras, of course, they are the first sons born of Brahma, sometimes known as Manasaputra, or mind born, born from the mind of Lord Brahma. So the four Sanak, Sanatan, Sanandan, and Sanak Kumara. Sometimes it's said that Sanak means ancient, Sanatan, eternal, Sanandan, ever joyful, and Sanak Kumara, ever youthful. So they're also known as the Shaktivesh avatars. So Laghu Bhagavatam Baruba Goswami, he gives a whole list and definition of who and what are the Shaktivesh avatars. So Prabhupada mentions in purport to 3.5.21, he says that generally the eternal associates of the Lord in the spiritual sky do not come to the material world. Sometimes they come, however, by the order of the Lord, not to hold any administrative post, like not as a politician, but simply to associate with the Lord in person and to propagate the message of God in human society. Such empowered representatives are called Shaktivesh avatars, or incarnations invested with the transcendental power of attorney. So, Shaktivesh avatars are said to have eternal bodies, and specifically the four Kumaras, they were empowered with Gyan Shakti, the empowered to distribute transcendental knowledge. So other Shaktivesh avatars we see Narada Muni, he's empowered with Bhakti Shakti, empowered to teach devotional service. Prithu Maharaj, empowered with Palana Shakti, or to rule and maintain living beings. Parashuram, empowered Dushta Dhamana Shakti, or empowered to cut down the rogues and the demons who are harassing the residents of the planet. And Veda Vyas, empowered to compile the Vedas. Anantasesh, he's a jiva, but Shaktivesh jiva, empowered for the personal service of Vishnu, Swa Sevava Shakti, and bearing all the planets within the universe on his hoods. This is Bhudharana Shakti. So there's actually two different types of this avatars. You have the Shaktivesh, and then you have the Avesh, which is sometimes known as the Vibhuti incarnation. So it's like the Avesh or Vibhuti incarnation is like an indirect incarnation. So they're empowered with a particular aspect of Krishna's energy. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the chapter Opulences of Absolute, Krishna, he says to Arjuna who some of these Avesh incarnations are. So he mentions among the demigods, I am Indra, and amongst the Vasus, I am Agni, amongst the priests, I am Brihaspati, amongst the generals, I am Kartikeya, amongst the mountains, I am Meru, the sages, Brigu. So he continues like that. So this is like indirect, like Vibhuti mean a certain opulence of the Absolute. So it's interesting to know there's two different times, direct and indirect, or Shaktivesh and Avesh. So sometimes there's the question comes up with Srila Prabhupada, a Shaktivesh avatar, and many classes, many speakers I hear, they say Srila Prabhupada Shaktivesh. So it's an interesting question. So he's speaking to Bhanu Swami and hearing what Srila Prabhupada himself, he says in his purports, and we, the GBC haven't given any official proclamation of who Srila Prabhupada's identity is, but we can say definitely he's an eternal associate of Krishna, and he's empowered with certain vibhutis or aveshas, and particularly we can identify that translating and writing the Vedic literature he's definitely empowered to be able to do that. And the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada mentioned that he said that saffron cloth for the sannyasis are a passport for entry everywhere. And just historically, like before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and previously, generally the sannyasis or more the Babajis, they would wear white. Saffron wasn't so widely worn. It was definitely there, but it was more Babajis wearing white. But they were, like the Vaishnava Babajis, were quite in disrepute. They had a very bad reputation, quite degraded in different ways. So when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati started the Gaudiya Math, he wanted to revive, like carrying on with his father's mission, revive the reputation of the Vaishnavas. So rather than having his sannyasis wearing white, he chose that, like the renunciate sannyasis and brahmacharis would wear saffron, just to differentiate from the fallen Babaji, so-called Babajis. And so the particular saffron colour was the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, like the saffron colour we're familiar with in ISKCON, that particular shade. And the other Vaishnava Sampradaya, the Madhava Sampradaya, is a more like red colour. So different colours, different shades were used for different Sampradayas, just to identify or differentiate. And also the tilak that we have is coming from the Gaudiya Math. The other Vaishnava Sampradayas, they have different types, different shapes and colours of tilak. But it's all there just to identify which particular, lineage that you're in. So Prabhupada says that those in the renounced order of life have no other business but preaching the glories and supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But sometimes you see in India that you have sannyasis wearing saffron, they get caught up into politics, which is really not in the mood of what a sannyasi should be. And I've even seen some footage of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister. He's there dressed in saffron, because saffron has engendered respect, as Prabhupada says, but sometimes it's sort of misused in that way, that they're thinking of him in saffron, and I'm presenting myself as a renunciate, I might get more votes. That's not really the mood of a sannyasi wearing saffron. So sometimes it is misused sometimes. Prabhupada continues that a sannyasi, he is not refused any gift he might demand from a householder. So a lot of presidents like that. Going back to Ramlila Vishwamitra, he came to ask Maharaj Dasarath for his sons, Ram and Lakshman, to help him defeat demons. Of course, Dasarath was completely horrified that how could his young sons go to the forest, even if they were in the company of Vishwamitra, to kill these demons. But eventually he had to agree to give them as Vishwamitra. He come as a renunciate, and Dasarath had already promised that whatever you want I can give. Of course, he wasn't expecting his sons, had to give his sons, but Vishwamitra as a renunciate, he couldn't be denied. And similar situation when the sannyasi Lakshmapati came to Hadai Pandit to ask for his son Nityananda. Hadai Pandit had already promised, whatever you want, I will give you. And again, he wasn't really thinking, I will give you my son. But because he had promised, and because Lakshmipati, coming as a renunciate, he was obliged to give his son. And also on a more positive, like many sannyasis, they use their position to get audience with different VIPs, heads of states, presidents, prime ministers. You see Radhanath Swami, he's able to get audience with a lot of these personalities and speaking in amongst politicians in the US and in the House of Commons in Britain, and so there is definitely still some respect. A renunciate in Saffron engenders respect even outside India, where that Vedic culture is still present to some degree. So Prabhupada, one of his missions, encouraging his disciples that yes, we can distribute books and preach to anybody and everybody, but particularly if we can influence the influential. That was specific what he was saying. If you can influence somebody who has great influence, the benefit and effect of your preaching will be even greater. And we see, like in Hollywood, whatever the Hollywood stars do, that becomes the trend. And VIPs, royals, it was some years ago, but there was Prince Charles. No, it wasn't Charles, it was, what's his name? What's his son's oldest son's name? William and Kate, isn't it? Yeah. So they were pictured walking along the beach. It was sort of winter time. They had knee-high boots. They cost about £400. And I read about a week later, every shop in Britain had sold out of those boots, because the royals were wearing them. So you hear that sort of thing, that, a famous person, whatever they do, everybody follows. And Krishna says that whatever standard set by, prominent people, everybody follows. So Prabhupada was using that propensity, human propensity, to influence the influential. If you're able to encourage and inspire influential people with this philosophy, other people will follow that. And so Prabhupada, wherever he went, he was able to have access, travelling around the world many times. But there was one particular situation which Prabhupada was very disappointed that, as we may know, that the only country he was ever denied entry was Singapore. So this was in the, I think, early 70s. So just reading from the, I think it's from the Caritamrita, that on arrival at Singapore airport, however, without explanation, immigration authorities flatly refused Srila Prabhupada and his entourage entry into the country. Nanda Kamar, who was one of his servants, spoke to the headman, a Chinese official, Mr. Bhadwani, who was there to greet Srila Prabhupada. Mr. Bhadwani had invited so many VIPs and important people in Singapore and had hired a big hall, and all the program was ready, and he'd come to the airport to greet Prabhupada and take him to the program. But unfortunately, and he was tried frantically to appease the authorities, but the Singapore authorities refused to accept Prabhupada entry, as we hear, without explanation. So Prabhupada sat down in the crowded transit lounge, disappointed and feeling ill. While Shamashundra went to try to book a flight to Sydney, Prabhupada had often complained about immigration officers who, totally ignorant of spiritual etiquette, would question a sadhu at the border. He compared them to barking watchdogs. Yow, 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 where is your visa? So formerly he had explained a sadhu would be allowed unhindered entrance even to a king's palace. In the course of preaching, certainly Prabhupada was prepared to undergo difficulties, but this unequivocal refusal of entry was particularly disturbing. So as we said, that Singapore was really the only country he was denied entrance. So just carrying on with the purport, the doorkeepers should have known that the four sages had no other business, and therefore to restrict them from entering the palace was not apt. So, of course, for that Leela to go on, by the influence of Yogamaya, Jai and Vijay, they failed to recognize the four Kumaras as saintly personalities. And, the very fact that they are in Vaikuntha, they'd already travelled through 6 gates coming into, the palace of Vishnu. And they were just about to want to enter through the 7th gate, which Jai and Vijay were guarding. So the very fact that they were there at the 7th gate obviously showed they were qualified to be there. But Jai and Vijay, somehow or other, they couldn't understand that and recognise the actual spiritual position of the 4 Kumaras. And therefore the 4 Kumaras became angry and cursed Jai and Vijay. So Prabhupada mentions that the younger brother of desire suddenly appeared in person. Who's the younger brother of desire? Desire or lust is anger. Where you get one, you always get the other. And we know there's actually 6 enemies of the mind, that lust, anger, greed, delusion, madness, envy. So these are all ready to attack and influence the mind, just under the influence of the mode of ignorance. So particularly anger and lust are always seen. And it's said that at the beginning of creation, Lord Brahma, so many things he created, and one of those things was anger after frustration. So if your desire or lust is unfulfilled, you become angry. Indeed in Bhagavad Gita 2:62-63, that while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person can develop attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. So you develop attachment for them, but that lust doesn't get fulfilled, or you're checked from fulfilling that lust somehow or other. Anger is there, lust and anger, older and younger brother. And so from anger, complete delusion, delusion, bewilderment, memory. When memory is bewildered, your intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down into the material pool again. So, sometimes we see there's some sort of crime committed, and, it's just somehow or other a person's become angry and they've just completely lost all intelligence. They may end up grabbing a knife and stabbing somebody, and they're just completely horrified afterwards that they've actually done that. But at the time, they're just under the influence of anger. The whole intelligence is lost. And just in blind anger, they commit a particular act like that. So this is the influence of this lust and anger, other enemies of the mind. But Prabhupada does say that sometimes anger can be utilised, like we hear that the 4 Kumaras, and Prabhupada particularly stresses that to consider that even in the liberated stage there can be no anger is like an impersonal understanding. Like if there's no anger, no other sensual activities or interactions, it's like an impersonal understanding. But that anger for the liberated persons is on behalf of the Supreme Person. It's not out of some personal frustration or personal sense gratification. So, in Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada mentioned that krodha or anger is not good, but anger that is utilised for Krishna's service it is the proper utilisation of anger. So that anger was utilised for Lord Ramachandra's service, like Hanuman, for instance. Hanuman became very angry, but he was doing it on behalf of Lord Ramachandra. Also, Arjuna has described that his eyes were the colour of red hot copper. They're so red out of anger, but he was fighting on behalf of Krishna, not on behalf of his own personal sense gratification. It mentioned that the Kamaras, that their eyes become red out of anger. But it's because their desire to see Supreme Personality was being checked. And Bhagavad Gita 16:12, we hear that they believe that to gratify the senses unto the end of life is the prime necessity of human civilization. This is the chapter Divine Demoniac Natures. Thus there is no end to their anxiety, being bound by hundreds and thousands of desires, by lust and anger. They secure money by illegal means for sense gratification. So nothing is off the book, so to speak. When there's lust and anger, a person becomes determined to try to fulfill their desire. But we know that that lust can never be fulfilled. It's like trying to put out a fire by throwing gasoline onto it, throwing petrol onto it. It may go down, temporarily, but in the next second it just fires up even stronger. So rather than try to fulfill lust and anger by engaging in one's regular sadhana, we're able to just cool the mind, cool the intelligence and discrimination, so that we're able to operate in a way that free from these enemies of the mind. And by remaining in the mode of goodness and ultimately spiritual goodness, we can come free from these lower influences of the mode of ignorance, these 6 enemies of the mind: lust, anger, greed, envy, etc. So as the story unfolds, we hear in the next few verses that because the Kamaras have been checked for their desire, then they ultimately curse Jai and Vijay. But at that time, Lord Vishnu, understanding the situation, he hurries to the scene and he says, actually, these are my men, I have to take responsibility. And yes, you boys have rightly cursed my servants because they were acting improperly, and I understand that this curse has been rightly given, and so, but he gives them the option that you can, if you have to go down to the material world, you can stay there 7 births as my devotee or 3 births as my enemy. And so, of course, the Jai and Vijay, we know that our goal is to get back here as quick as possible, so we'll just take the 3 births but they're always connected because they're eternal associates of Vishnu. That they're connected with Vishnu through the yoga of anger, always being very angry with Vishnu, but that's their connection. That 3 births, they become very angry, and ultimately they're delivered by Vishnu in each of those 3 births. Okay, so thank you very much. We'll end there. If there's any questions or comments. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Ki Jai.